Hello, all you positive heads out there. It's so good to be back with all you beautiful reflections of the one source consciousness that creates and animates all things. If you're new to this podcast, of course, we're super happy to have you here. And if you've been listening and enjoying for a while, I would be super grateful if you would please take a moment to give us a review on Apple Podcasts. It's one of the best and simplest ways to pay it forward and help others find the show so that they too can tap into the powerful perspectives and positive vibrations we are collectively emanating. The other unique and magical way to share this show is by sending any friends you think would benefit from listening to this podcast our Game with the Universe link at positivehead.com/game. Also listed in the show notes, which will serve them up a quote-unquote random episode when they click it. Just instruct them before clicking the link to close their eyes for a moment and sincerely ask the universe to cue up the episode that contains the insight and perspectives that they most need to hear at this point in their life journey, and then click to listen to whatever episode is synchronistically served up to them. I have heard time and time again from people about the incredible results they received playing the game. So just tell your friends magical results are guaranteed or their karma back.
All right, all you positive heads, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me today on this first day of August. I'm not quite sure where the time is going this summer, this illusory time that just seems to be speeding up and speeding up. I swear it was just July, wasn't it? So it's August and my kids start school on Monday already. We start a little early here in Arizona and summer is pretty much coming to a close for us. Although, unfortunately, it is just hot as the bejeez everywhere, isn't it? So I hope you all are, well, in the United States anyway, I hope you all are keeping nice and cool, keeping those tempers cool as well. It seems to make everyone a little more on edge when it's hot. Typically happens around here in Arizona every summer. People start to get a little more angry on the road, and yeah, it's an interesting thing to see. And as an empath, it's something that I pick up every time I leave the house. And so I thought it would be an interesting thing to talk about today is living life as an empath. Maybe you are an empath. Maybe you live with an empath. Maybe that person is your significant other. Maybe it's your child. And it's really helpful to understand these aspects of ourselves and of our loved ones so we can all understand each other a little bit better. So I'm going to go through a little bit of my experience as an empath and also some of the traits that we can recognize in empaths, and then also different ways to work with these gifts that we have. You know, I often, when I was younger, would refer to this as a curse because feeling everyone's emotions feels like a curse. It's not the easiest thing to walk around and feel everything going on around you. But as I got older, I learned that this is my superpower and this is my gift. And I've learned to work with it. And so it doesn't overwhelm me as much anymore. And it's definitely been a process. Not so much an easy one at times. And I'll tell you what, because when I was younger, I was born in the 70s. So I grew up in the 80s and 90s, which means up until graduating from college, there was no such thing as the internet. Like that was completely unheard of. We didn't even have cell phones. We were still stopping at payphones when we would go places. So the information that was available for us at that time was really hard to find. You couldn't just Google something. And if you wanted to find information on anything metaphysical or paranormal, I had to go to the metaphysical/occult bookstore all the way down in South Philadelphia, which, by the way, is still there. And it's one of my favorite bookstores. If you're in Philadelphia or visit Philadelphia, the store is called the Garland of Letters. It's a beautiful store. They literally have everything. But that was my only go-to source when I was younger. And so I had to kind of figure out what being an empath was all on my own. There weren't the resources. So it makes you feel like you're going crazy when you're picking up all of these energies, and this idea isn't even out there yet. So it was definitely a learning process. And I have to say, I'm a little envious of you all out there now who are becoming aware of your gifts, because this information is out there and you have the help. You don't have to struggle around in the darkness like I did and some of us that are older did. But with that, I also had to figure it out on my own, and I came up with some really good things that help me, and I want to share them so hopefully they can help you or help others in your life. So first of all, what actually is an empath? And what's interesting, when you look it up in the dictionary, what you'll get is a person with the paranormal ability to apprehend the mental or emotional state of another individual. Paranormal. It's interesting. It's funny that that is still the definition in the dictionary online. Because I think it was back in maybe 2000, early 2000s, Dr. Elaine Aron, actually, I'm lying. It was in the early 90s. Dr. Elaine Aron discovered the trait of the highly sensitive person. And she found that made up of about 15 to 20% of people. So 15 to 20% of us are highly sensitive people, or empaths. Some people distinguish the two. I think they're very, very similar. I think maybe the distinguishing factor is that maybe an empath is more intuitive, although I feel like a highly sensitive person is also very intuitive. They just might not know it yet or might not recognize it yet. I think we're all intuitive. And so it's just about recognizing our own intuition and learning to listen to it. And as empaths, you almost don't have a choice, because you're being bombarded with these feelings all the time. And the thing about it is, when you get a really strong hit about something, I always explain it like this. I have an internal good egg, bad egg meter, and it never lies to me. I always know intuitively, is this okay for me or is this not okay for me? It's a very, very helpful tool, and it has saved me many, many times. I always, always, always listen to it. It's never wrong, ever. And so when you're experiencing this kind of thing over and over again, that's how you learn to listen. So an empath can't really get around this, because they have these feelings of what somebody else is feeling. And then maybe that person will say, this is how I'm feeling. And then they've learned over time that this is actually what they're sensing, is other people's feelings. I'm going to tell you a story about the first time I realized that this is actually what was happening to me. I could already tell that I was picking up other people's feelings, but I didn't really understand the depth of it. And I was at the airport one day. I was just getting back into Phoenix, and it was the summertime and it was hot, and I was kind of not so happy to be back. I wanted to stay where I was. It was beautiful and cool, and all my friends were there and my family. And so coming back was kind of difficult. And I was a little sad about it, but I didn't feel terribly sad. But all of a sudden I'm standing outside waiting for our ride, and this overwhelming emotion came over me of intense grief. Like, I just wanted to bawl my eyes out. It was so, so intense. And I realized, hold on, I'm sad, but really not that sad. I mean, this is coming from absolutely nowhere. So I turned around and I saw this woman behind me who was just on the brink of tears. She just had that face on where she was just, you could tell it was about to happen any second, and she just looked so distraught. So I went over to her and I asked her if I could help her. And then she just started crying and crying and crying. She was slightly mentally disabled, traveling by herself, and had no idea how to get home. And so she was really, really distraught. And so from that point on, I realized, because I couldn't even see this woman, she was behind me. So I realized, okay, this is what it's like. This is, I'm picking up other people's energies for a fact now. I get it. This was about 10 or more years ago now. And ever since that point, I've really understood and been able to work with these energies, because there was a point in my life where I shut this off, where I didn't want to feel any of it, but it's good to feel. It's kind of like how we can turn off our intuitive abilities if they scare us. Well, this was affecting me in such a way that I just didn't want to feel it anymore. But over time, you can only push it away for so long. And so I have learned now how to be an effective empath and really embrace my gifts and use it to help people in a beneficial way and not in a way where I am draining myself. Because that's one of the traits of an empath. We can give and give and give at our own detriment because we love to help others so much. We feel everything so deeply, are so sensitive, are very, very good listeners. So you'll find that people, if you're an empath, that people will come to you and tell you everything. I have strangers come up to me in the stores and just start talking, just having full-on conversations with me out of nowhere, because that's just, people feel comfortable with you because they know you're listening and they know that you care, because there's an energy that exudes when you are coming from this place and people can feel it. See, we're all empaths. So empaths really need time to themselves and time to recharge, because being out in environments and surrounded with all different other energies can be a little much, a little too overwhelming. And so it's really important to take alone time and recharge our batteries. We can be really sensitive to noises, to smells, and just have highly tuned senses overall. One of the biggest things is that empaths have really, really big hearts, that they tend to give too much, like way too much. So that's one of the most important things to realize if you are an empath or have one in your life who is maybe giving more than they can and they're stretching themselves thin to help you. You might be able to turn around and help them not help you so much, because it's difficult when we see somebody hurting and we feel what they feel and we just want to make it better. We're helpers to the worst extreme, almost martyrs. And that is not a good thing. We really need to be careful about coming back to our own center, staying grounded. One really good way for empaths to replenish and get grounded is getting back into nature, spending time in nature every day. Whatever you can do to sit under a tree or sit in the grass, take your shoes off and put your feet in the dirt. These are things that help you to center and realign and get back into your own space, because as an empath, it's really important to understand what's you and what's not you. And that is the biggest thing that I learned along my journey, is what's mine and what's not mine. And so that takes a lot of personal introspection to first figure out what's yours, where do I stay? Where do I resonate? And then that way, when you're hit with other energies, you can recognize, oh, that's not mine. That's not me. I'm just feeling them. Otherwise, everything feels like you. And it's hard to make that distinguishment. If you're all of a sudden in a crowd and you're feeling angry or anxious or sad all of a sudden, and you don't know why, because you haven't done the centering and grounding and the understanding of who you are when you're by yourself, then this is going to be hard when you get out in public. So very important to have this understanding of who am I? That way you can say, this is my energy and that's your energy. And that is one way that we can protect ourselves from absorbing too much energy that is not our own. So there's a spectrum of empaths, and some are more sensitive than others, meaning all empaths will feel someone else's energy, and other empaths, some empaths, will actually physically feel everything. So it's either you feel it in your mind or you feel it in your body, or both. But when you're feeling it in your body, you're like getting an ache and a pain that isn't yours. As a physician, let me tell you, this was something I had to work on, because I would walk into a room and this person would come in for some kind of digestive disturbance, say, right? So I have their chart and I know I'm going to be talking about digestion, right? When I go in this room, but I walk in and all of a sudden my knee has this awful, awful pain in it. And I sit there for a while and go through the whole intake until I finally say, what's going on with your knee? Because I can feel it. The way I was able to finally work around all that is that I said to myself, this isn't mine. This is yours. So I release it from me, and I don't necessarily even give it back to that person because they don't need to be carrying any more of that either. So I release it back to the creation, back to where it came from. And in that way, I'm also helping that person, I feel like, by not giving it back to them. They don't need it back. They have enough, right? So it should come as no surprise that if you're an empath, you are most likely leaning towards a field of helping people. And a lot of times that's doctors and nurses and healers, psychologists, all sorts of healers of any kind are typically those along the empathic spectrum. One thing that always seems to come up in terms of the traits of an empath is empaths can be a target for what are termed energetic vampires or narcissists, which is also just an energetic vampire of the extreme, I would say. Now, I think that it's important to understand here, this is kind of something that goes along with the topic from Tuesday, Toxic People, because let's think about an energetic vampire as purely an archetype as opposed to someone else being a monster, right? So this is just an archetype of a life-sucking monster, but that person is not that monster. I just really want to make that distinction. I think it's really important because the vampire is life-sucking, blood-sucking in order for them to survive. So it's not something that I feel like they do consciously. It's just their way of getting energy, like a moth to the flame. Yeah? So, and with narcissists, ultimately, a narcissist, what that really is the ultimate feeling of unworthiness, which then turns into this inability to love anybody else but themselves. It is a protection mechanism. It is a survival mechanism. And so, yes, they're going to be drawn to us. But what's the best way as helpers that we can help them? Because they are drawn because we want to help them. We bring them into our lives. I had an awfully lovely relationship with a narcissist when I was in college. Had no idea. The whole gaslighting, the whole nine. Had no idea that this was like a thing. It is. And we feel bad for them. We want to help them be better people. But we have to understand that we can't put ourselves on the line for anybody else. We don't sacrifice our own life force to give it to somebody else. So if we want to help these people, we don't need to give them our energy. We actually help them by not allowing them to take it from us, by using the power of no. And what I mean by we help them is if we allow them to manipulate us this way and take from us, then what we're doing is helping them along a negatively polarized path. So by saying no and saying, you know what, I'm setting my boundary, this is not okay in my life, then you don't give them that potential of manipulating you, of then offering that potential for them to polarize negatively. You're actually helping them to polarize positively. Maybe you're just not giving them the opportunity to go the other direction. So how we really help them then, we can give them the energy they seek, but the energy does not have to come from you. It is not your energy that you have to give them. You can give to them the energy of the universe. Now, any Reiki practitioner out there will understand what I'm talking about. We have the ability as human resonators to channel the energy of the universe through us and out of us in order to offer the opportunity for healing. You don't need to be attuned in Reiki to be able to do this. All you need to do is visualize it, imagine it, and let it pour through you and out of you with the intention of that energy feeding that person and helping that person. That way, they get the energy they need and you don't get drained and everybody wins. Perfect, right? So then that leads me to this concept of energetic protection. And yes, in the sense of protecting yourself from absorbing a bunch of energies that you don't want, then yes, you'd want to maybe surround yourself in a protective bubble, which we've all know that technique. But not a protective bubble where you're separating yourself and you're pushing others out. You want to create a bubble with the intention of just maintaining your own boundary and being able to recognize what's yours. In this way, you're able to not push others away and just keep yourself centered. And the bubble is just like your own energetic space. So you're not separate from anybody else. You're just maintaining your own space. And that feels different, doesn't it? And remember, the greatest protection that we all have, that any of us ever has, is love. Love is always our greatest protector. We can look at a demon in the face and say, I love you. And instantly they shrink. It's just the way energy works. Love is the greatest protection that we have. So being able to stay heart-centered and grounded is going to be your greatest protection. Staying centered in love. The way you do that, it's very simple. Put your hand on your heart, close your eyes, and think about the person in this world that you love the most. And it could even be a pet. And think about how that feels in your heart. And now you're heart-centered and you stay in this energy. This energy is what protects you. So that is the number one tool for an empath. Always stay centered in the love that you are and grounded. As empaths, we have a tendency to maybe isolate ourselves, which, we came down here as resonators of this beautiful love. So the last thing we really want to do is isolate ourselves because we need to be out. We need to be spreading this love and shining it everywhere. And we can't do that if we're held up in our little box. So we can use these different techniques in order to stay in our bubble when we go out. And that way, that bubble can just emanate all this light to everybody else who needs it. And lastly, meditation. Meditation, meditation, meditation all the time, every day. Everybody needs to meditate. It is the most important practice that you can do for yourselves and for this world every single day. So when you're meditating all the time, it's way easier to be centered and grounded and understand what energy is yours and what energy is not yours, so that you can interact in the world and you can spread your love and light everywhere you go. We are highly sensitive for a reason. We have this intense desire to help people for a reason. We came here to do just that. We can't do it if we're held up in our own little box, hiding from everyone because it's too uncomfortable. So use these tools, use these techniques, make it more comfortable, recognize your own energies from everyone else's, and it's a little easier out there, empaths, I promise. All right, everyone. That's enough for me today. I love you all so much. I'm going to leave you with a song. This is Trevor Hall, Indigo. Till next time, everyone.
I met up with Grandmama, she told me of that dream, told me of that mystic water, told me of that tree. Don't you be afraid, my child, don't you be afraid of what they say. Gotta get that apple medicine so they can't fool you. Go inside the heart and don't let all the dark thoughts school you. Don't you be afraid, my child, don't you be afraid of what they say. I've got to go back to those skies indigo, back to holy country roads, back to what my sweetheart knows. I've got to play like a child in her lap. No defending, no attack. I know that spirit's got my back. Ew, 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 ew. Continues to that honor in the ocean. Whale song surrounding, we were feeling sweet emotion. Don't you be afraid, my child, don't you be afraid of what they say. We were staring into full moon eyes of white Pueo. I could see the circle coming round like a big halo. Don't you be afraid, my child, don't you be afraid of what they say. Yeah. I've got to go back to those skies indigo, back to holy country roads, back to what my sweetheart knows. I've got to play like a child in her lap. No defending, no attack. I know that spirit's got my back. back to those skies indigo, back to holy country roads, back to what my sweetheart knows. And don't you be afraid, I've got to play like a child in her lap. Nah, nah, no defending, no attack. I know that spirit's got my back.